Imagine a world veiled in the quiet breath of an early morning fog, a landscape both intimately familiar and profoundly alien. Here, the trees stand as silent, skeletal sentinels, and every sound is swallowed by the mist, distorted into something unrecognizable. It is in these hushed, uncertain hours that the first whispers begin to drift across the fields, seeping through the narrow lanes of a small, isolated village. These are not the whispers of wind through the branches, but of something foreign, something deeply unsettling, carried on the damp air. This was the reality for the people of Eyam, a picturesque English village nestled in the Derbyshire Dales, during the long, hot summer of 1665. The beginning of the end arrived innocuously, disguised as commerce. It was a simple crate of cloth from London, delivered by a traveling merchant to the village tailor, a man named George Vickers. The fabric, rich and vibrant, was destined to become new garments for the hopeful. But as Vickers unfolded the bolts of cloth, he noted their unusual dampness. Thinking little of it, he hung the material near his hearth to dry, unknowingly releasing invisible stowaways into the air, fleas, carrying a pestilence that would rewrite the village's fate. Within days, Vickers was consumed by a violent illness. A fever raged through him, and his body erupted in the painful, swollen buboes that were the plague's signature. The villagers, long accustomed to the fevers and ailments of the seasons, initially hoped for a swift recovery, but his rapid, agonizing decline and subsequent death sent a tremor of pure fear through Eyam. The news spread like a contagion itself. Something was wrong, dreadfully wrong. As the mist clung to the thatched rooftops, more villagers began to fall ill. The symptoms were now unmistakable: the sudden chills, the burning fevers, the unspeakable pain. Each new case was a drumbeat of doom, echoing through the stone cottages and cobbled lanes. Panic began to curdle the air as families watched their loved ones, searching every flushed cheek for the first sign of the sickness. The village's isolation, once a source of peace, now became an ominous cage. Surrounded by rolling hills and dense woodlands, Eyam was cut off. News from the outside world was scarce, though rumors of a great plague ravaging London had reached them. It had all felt so distant, a horror belonging to someone else. Now the threat was inside their homes, having slipped past their defenses in the folds of imported cloth. Villagers gathered in hushed, fearful circles, their voices low as they debated the sickness. Was it a punishment from God, a curse laid upon them, or simply a terrible misfortune brought by an outsider? The local rector, William Mompesson, alongside his predecessor, Thomas Stanley, would soon be forced into a decision that would echo through history. But in these first uncertain days, there was only fear. The mist seemed to thicken with each passing week, blurring the line between safety and danger, between neighbor and threat. Every cough, every feverish child, every bolted door became a portent of doom. And yet, even as dread took root in their hearts, the people of Eyam clung to a fragile hope, unaware that their quiet village was about to become the stage for one of history's most extraordinary acts of collective sacrifice. This self-imposed prison, this village-turned-tomb, is a stark reminder of how any place can become a haunted threshold, a space caught between the world of the living and the memory of the dead. Step cautiously as we cross into these realms, where the echoes of the forgotten linger in the shadows, and every creak of the floorboards is a whisper from the past. A threshold, in folklore, is a liminal space.
A doorway, a gate, an entryway. It is neither here nor there, a fragile membrane separating the known from the unknown. In places scarred by tragedy, these thresholds become focal points for what remains. Consider the infamous Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. Its heavy iron doors and decaying cell blocks were designed to enforce total isolation, to break the spirit. Today, its echoing hallways are said to trap the restless souls of former inmates. Visitors speak of sudden, icy drafts and disembodied voices that seem to emanate from the very entrances to the cell blocks, as if the spirits themselves hesitate to cross back into our world. Why do these echoes persist? Perhaps our minds are simply wired to find patterns in chaos, to interpret a flicker of shadow or a distant noise as something supernatural, especially when we are primed by stories of loss. But sometimes, history gives us reason to wonder. Journey to the Winchester Mystery House in California, a sprawling architectural fever dream. Built by Sarah Winchester, the tormented heiress to a rifle fortune, the mansion is a labyrinth of stairways that lead to nowhere and doors that open into solid walls. Legend claims she designed her home as a maze to confuse the vengeful spirits of those killed by the very rifles that gave her wealth. To this day, visitors report the sound of inexplicable footsteps echoing down empty corridors, or the sharp slam of a door in a sealed-off wing. Are these mere tricks of a bizarre design, or the lingering echoes of a house built from grief and fear? Across the Atlantic, the Tower of London stands as a far older and more blood-soaked threshold. For nearly 1,000 years, it has been a stage for imprisonment, torture, and execution. The Queen's House, in particular, is said to be haunted by the sorrowful specter of Anne Boleyn. Guards on the night watch have reported seeing her ghostly figure gliding near the doorway where she awaited her fate, a final, terrible threshold between her life as a queen and her death as a traitor. But these stories are not confined to grand landmarks. Any home can become a haunted threshold, a place where the past refuses to stay buried. All across the world, tales persist of houses where clocks stop at the exact hour of a death, or where cold spots linger by the front door, a chilling reminder of a previous inhabitant who never truly left. Paranormal investigators often focus their equipment on these entryways, hoping to capture a disembodied voice on a digital recorder, a faint, static-laced whisper from just beyond the veil. But what if the most terrifying shadows are not those of the past, but those that move in the present? What if they are not echoes, but living things? As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long, distorted shadows across the land, it isn't just darkness that creeps in, it is a palpable dread. In this world, the villagers, once lively and social at dusk, now hurry indoors, their doors bolted with trembling hands. Something has changed. Something in the shadows has begun to speak. It began subtly, as these things often do, a flicker in the periphery, a shape that seemed to twist when you weren't looking directly at it. People dismissed it as tricks of the mind, their imaginations running wild in the twilight. But soon the whispers grew more insistent. There was the case of old man Ramas, the village storyteller. He swore that the shadows in his small cottage began to move of their own accord. Seated by his flickering oil lamp, he watched in disbelief as his own shadow stretched, bent, and then gestured, its dark finger pointing toward the door as if urging him to flee. At first, Ramas tried to laugh it off, but then a voice, dry as autumn leaves, echoed from the darkness.
It was unmistakable, and it said, "You don't belong here." He was not alone. Children claimed to hear their names being called from the darkest corners of their rooms. The village dogs, once fearless guardians of the night, now whimpered and shied away from their own silhouettes. Farmers awoke to find strange, intricate symbols etched into the dust outside their homes, as if the shadows themselves had been busy in the night. The symbols matched ancient warnings from folklore, omens that foretold disaster. Panic began to spread like a fever. Sleep became a forgotten luxury, as every creak of a floorboard, every gust of wind, seemed to carry voices from the void. Families huddled together, their lamps burning through the long nights, but no amount of light could dispel the terror completely. The local priest performed rituals, his prayers swallowed by an oppressive silence. The shadows only grew bolder, stretching across the walls even in candlelight, forming grotesque shapes that mimicked the villagers' terrified movements in a silent, mocking dance. One chilling night, a group of villagers gathered in the square, their torches held high against the encroaching dark. As the flames flickered, a collective gasp swept through the crowd. On the ground, their shadows had begun to shift and merge, flowing together like ink on water. They formed the unmistakable outline of a tall, thin figure none of them recognized. It seemed to speak, not with a single voice, but with the cacophony of whispers they had all heard. A terrifying, unified message that promised, "We are always here." The terror was not just in what they saw, but in what they felt. A cold grip on the heart, a pressing weight in the air, the absolute certainty of being watched by something ancient and malevolent. The village, once a haven, now existed in a nightmare, where every shadow was a messenger of an unfolding, unspeakable horror.
And yet, perhaps the most unsettling horrors are not those that lurk in the darkness of the world, but those that lie hidden in the darkness of the human soul. Imagine standing before a portrait, its painted eyes seeming to follow your every move. But this is no ordinary painting. Beyond the masterful brushstrokes lies a secret, a hidden abyss that reflects not the subject's face, but their very essence. This is the enigma at the heart of the portrait's secret. In Oscar Wilde's chilling novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, the portrait becomes a supernatural mirror. It reflects not Dorian's outward beauty and eternal youth, but every sin, every cruel act, every moral corruption he commits. While Dorian's face remains a mask of unblemished perfection, the painting festers. The canvas bears the scars of his soul's descent into depravity, the once handsome face twisting into a sneering, grotesque mockery of the man he used to be. This is more than a clever plot device. It is a profound commentary on the duality of human nature. The portrait's secret is the abyss that exists within each of us, the capacity for both good and evil, for creation and for utter destruction. It poses a terrifying question. What if all our hidden thoughts and secret deeds were made visible for the world to see? Would any of us dare to gaze about our true selves? The portrait becomes a physical manifestation of guilt, a visual diary of every transgression. Each new brushstroke of decay records a lie told, a heart broken, a life ruined. Over time, the vibrant colors of the original painting are swallowed by sickly hues and monstrous distortions, as if the abyss itself is consuming the image from within. But the secret of the portrait extends beyond fiction. Throughout history, artists have hidden messages, symbols, and even confessions within their work. Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa has inspired centuries of debate about her enigmatic smile. With some theorizing, it conceals a secret sadness or a hidden truth. Frida Kahlo's unflinching self-portraits are a raw and open window into her lifelong battle with physical pain and emotional turmoil. In these cases, the abyss is not supernatural, but deeply, achingly human, a reflection of suffering, resilience, and the staggering complexity of our inner lives. To glimpse into the portrait's secret is to confront an uncomfortable truth, that beneath every flawless facade, a darkness can churn. It is a reminder to look closer, to see what lies just beneath the surface, waiting in the shadows of the canvas. As we venture further into this gloom, the darkness ceases to be a mere backdrop. It becomes a veil, concealing truths that have long evaded our understanding. Here, in this dimly lit realm, revelations emerge not with the blinding clarity of daylight, but with the slow, careful unveiling of secrets. For centuries, darkness has been synonymous with fear and the unknown. Our ancestors spun tales of monsters that lurked where the light could not reach. But we are now discovering that the gloom is not empty. In fact, it can be a catalyst. Psychologists have found that dim lighting can encourage creative and unconventional thinking, making the gloom a breeding ground for innovation rather than just dread. What once was seen as a purely negative space is now being recognized as an environment rich with hidden potential. This is profoundly true in the natural world. Consider the twilight zones of the deep ocean, where sunlight barely penetrates. Here, in the crushing, perpetual dark, life has found a way. Bioluminescent organisms create their own light, using it to communicate, to hunt, and to defend themselves in a silent, luminous ballet. For years, these strange flashes and glows baffled scientists,
But recent deep-sea expeditions have revealed complex, thriving communities in the abyss. The gloom is not empty. It is teeming with life, beautifully and bizarrely adapted to its challenges. Similarly, in the dense, ancient forests of the world, the interplay of shadow and light shapes the very fabric of the ecosystem. Plants like ferns and mosses have evolved to flourish in low-light conditions, carpeting the forest floor in green. Animals use the gloom for camouflage. The jaguar, a master of stealth, relies on the dappled shadows of the rainforest to stalk its prey, its spotted coat making it nearly invisible as it moves through patches of darkness. Here, gloom is not a hindrance, it is an ally, a vital element in the intricate dance of survival. On a symbolic level, the gloom represents the hidden aspects of ourselves, the parts we may fear to confront, but which often harbor our greatest wisdom and resilience. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote, "The only journey is the one within," suggesting that true revelation often comes from facing the shadows in our own minds. This is the journey into our personal gloom, where we can acknowledge our fears, our sorrows, and our hidden strengths, and in doing so, begin to understand our true nature. And so we arrive at the end. Picture the moment when you believe the terror is finally over. The monster is defeated, the shadows have receded, and the survivors are bathed in the pale light of dawn. But just as relief begins to wash over you, a single, chilling realization takes hold. The nightmare isn't finished. This is the final terrifying whisper, the moment the horror returns, reminding us that evil rarely dies quietly. In storytelling, this unending nightmare is a masterstroke of psychological terror.
Think of the final moments of the film Carrie. After the fire and the fury, her grave seems a place of peace, until a bloodied hand erupts from the earth, a final heart-stopping shock that rips away any sense of safety. Or consider the end of Friday the 13th. The final girl floats peacefully in a canoe on the calm, sun-dappled lake. The terror is over. And then the decomposing body of Jason Voorhees bursts from the water, dragging her down into the depths and the audience into a state of shock. This is more than just a jump scare. It is a narrative strategy that preys on our deepest fears, the fear that evil cannot be truly contained, that trauma and darkness will always return when we least expect them. It taps into a primal state of unresolved threat, a lingering unease that keeps our minds anxious and alert long after the story has ended. It's why these endings stay with us, haunting our thoughts. The unending nightmare is not limited to film. In literature, Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House closes with the protagonist's spirit forever trapped within the house's evil walls, her voice echoing for eternity. In video games like Silent Hill, even after defeating the final boss, the player is left with the suffocating sense that the town's curse is not broken, and the hero's sanity may be forever lost. This narrative choice mirrors a profound anxiety in our own lives, the fear that our struggles are never truly over, that safety is always temporary. It's a reflection of how trauma and grief can resurface unbidden years later. By refusing to offer a neat, clean resolution, these stories force us to confront the cyclical, persistent nature of fear itself. So, as the screen fades to black and the last whisper echoes in the silence, that lingering dread you feel is by design. It is the nightmare, unending, reminding us that in the landscape of horror, the story is never, ever truly over.